Hi, welcome to Be Live. My name is Susan Fleischmann. I'm the Executive Director of Cambridge Community Television, and you're watching my show, Not for Nothing, where I have the wonderful pleasure of talking to different executive directors of our many wonderful nonprofit organizations here in Cambridge. And tonight I am very pleased to have Renata von Tscharner from the Charles River Conservancy. Welcome. You have your own Be Live show, so this is a different slot for you.
Is, yes.
And you're on the different side of the desk, I think,
That's
right? So, Renata, one thing that I'm always moved by is the fact that you actually were the founder of the Charles River Conservancy, and I want to ask you what motivated you to start this organization and how that came about. Can you talk to me about that?
Yes, I started it 15 years ago, and I've always been in love with the Charles River. When I first came here in 1979, I wanted to jump in right away, and I was told, no. But you can test the water, which I then did, and I've always bicycled along the river. I learned to windsurf on the Charles,
Really?
and inline skate. So I've always lived near the Charles. So then in the late 90s, I started to teach at Harvard's Radcliffe Seminar in a landscape program, and I assigned spaces along the Charles to students. And so they designed areas, very challenging areas, like the area underneath the Zaken Bridge. And so I realized, well, there are some projects there that are very exciting to do, but teaching is not going to make it happen. So I incorporated an organization in 2000 and started to assemble a board, hired the first volunteer, wrote my friends letters saying I want to get that started. And so we started to build an organization, and so we've been doing that for 15 years. And after 15 years of struggles, we now broke ground on a skate park, and we have swimming in the river, and we have better bicycle path. We have about 2,000 volunteers and have games, so a lot of things happen along the river now.
Yeah, it must be so gratifying, because I know that, as you say, 15, 20 years ago, the thought of swimming in the Charles was just not a possibility. Of course, historically, Magazine Beach, for example, was a place where people who couldn't afford to go to the North Shore or the South Shore or the Cape to go swimming would go to Magazine Beach and be able to swim. But over the years, of course, the Charles became more and more polluted. There was a lot of runoff.
Well, actually, when people did swim in the 50s and all the way back in the river was horribly dirty. It was just sheer ignorance. It was just not knowing how dirty it is. And then as people started to do tests and public health concerns, and so then the MDC at the time, which is the agency that owns all the parklands, closed the river and built beaches. But somebody once told me that after 1700, you should not swim in the river, because the mills started in about 1630 and they polluted the river. But people swam very happily at Magazine Beach all along the river. And I don't even know of anecdotes of people being hurt by the dirty river, but it's good that the river is cleaner, and $500 million have been spent to clean up that river.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And of course, for those of us who live in a dense urban environment, having a place like the river and the river banks just makes our lives a lot better in so many ways. I mean, obviously recreationally, but just in terms of our souls, I think.
Yes.
You know. So over the course of the past 15 years, you've seen a lot of change along the river. I think in terms of different stakeholders being much more interested in the condition of the river. So,
yes.
Who else have you worked with? What other organizations do you work with?
Well, all our work is really partnership work, being it with the runners, the Cambridge Running Club, the bicyclists, the Boston Bicycle Union, the Mass Bike. And then there are groups like Magazine Beach, the Cambridge Neighborhood Association, Kathy Susie, who does a fabulous job of really getting Magazine Beach together. And then there are also the Charles River Cleanup Boat, the Charles River Watershed Association. We work with them on the swims. I think pretty much everything we do in partnership with somebody, and always with the state, the Department of Conservation and Recreation, because all the banks along the Charles don't belong to Cambridge or Boston, they belong to the state. And what we want to see happening is that the city Cambridge in this instance works closer with the state, because it's the city and the residents of Cambridge who need the parklands and who benefit from it, yet the monies are allocated by a state agency, and they have to care for 450,000 acres of parkland. So those acres along the Charles are not that important as they are for people in Cambridge. So it's important that the state legislators work with our city council members to make that a high priority, because there's such a high density and a high need here.
I think I've been a runner on the river. I've been a rower on the river. As you said, you learned how to inline skate along the river, and I think about the recreational uses of the river, which are quite extensive. And then I also wonder, does that have a negative impact on the banks of the river, that it's used so much recreationally?
Well, I don't think it has a negative impact. There's some conflicts. You know, if you are a person with a dog and a leash, and you have inline skaters, and you have bicyclists, and you have walkers, older people with children and runners, the path should be much wider. And obviously, if you are a frail person, you're afraid of the bikes. If you are a fast biker, you're annoyed at people with dogs and leashes. So yes, it's a matter of finding a way to coexist. The same on the river. If you're a rower and suddenly a kayak is in your way, that doesn't make you happy. Or you're a rower and a boat, a motorboat comes by and creates a wake. I also do stand-up paddleboarding on the river. And so motorboats are a real problem, because that can knock you over.
A wake can really
happen. So yes, I mean, but that's in a way a good problem to have, that so many people want to use the parklands, and now we need to find ways to accommodate those different uses. That's why we're working on underpasses, so that you don't have to fight the traffic each time you want to go by a bridge.
Do you find that most people who use the Charles River recreationally, do they have a respect for it, or do you, I mean, over the years I'm sure there have been lots of educational campaigns about, you know, taking care of the river. Do you feel like that's had an impact on the way people behave on the river, in terms of, you know, not littering, or, you know, making a mess out there?
I think so. I think the education is very much part of what we do. Every Earth Day, which is normally at the end of April, thousands of volunteers participate in the Earth Day cleanup. So I think once you filled a trash bag with coffee cups, styrofoam cups, you're probably less likely to throw one away again yourself. And we do that a lot with middle school students, with high school students. We get grants to work with high school students. And that's part of the effort, that they develop respect and a love for the river. And then they come back and bike and with their parents and maybe picnic. So that's all part of awareness building, because our mission is to make the parklands active, attractive, accessible for all.
Yes, I have. This is your mission statement, right? Is this your mission statement?
That's part of it, yes.
Part of it. The Charles River Conservancy is dedicated to the stewardship, renewal, and enhancement of the urban parklands along the Charles River. Well, I think you've done an amazing job in the past 15 years. And to that end, let's talk about some of the programs that you have. You've mentioned the volunteers. So you work extensively with schools and
extensively, but not exclusively. We have a lot of corporations that come to us, and they book already a year in advance, and they book once or twice a year, and they allow their employees to take time off from work to come and work with us. So they use it for team building and also giving back. And one activity that a lot of corporations love to do is to plant daffodil bulbs. So you come in the fall, in October, November, you dig those trenches in the soil. It's really hard. You put the bulbs in, and then as you run in the spring, you see a result. So it's like Benjamin Franklin said about chopping wood. You get the benefit twice. You're warm when you do it, and you're warm when you burn it. So we do a lot of that. And then also with school classes, and then link it in with educational opportunities to explain to them about the water quality, about how these parklands were created.
That's great. So in terms of other initiatives, you have the Sunday Parkland Games, and that happens during the spring,
warm months,
summer, and
in June,
early fall.
July, August, and September,
Mhm.
and they happen near, kind of between the Anderson Bridge and the Weeks Bridge,
Mhm.
and it's for children from ages 2 or 3
Wow.
up to 99, and we have equipment that is scaled for even very small children, but also for adults. And hundreds of families with their children come, and it's free. And then from 5 to 6 is a yoga session, and you look out over the glimmering water, and it's just very beautiful. You're underneath the trees, and it's provided by Karma Yoga. Great teachers, and it's a wonderful experience to be on the river, on the grass, and do your yoga session. Yeah.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah,
Well, I'm sure we'll hear about that on your show when that starts up.
That's
Again, in the
right.
spring, we're all dying for the spring, as the piles of snow are up to here.
Yeah.
The Swimmable Charles initiative is also something that I'm familiar with because we have a video here that we shot of people jumping into the Charles.
That's
which
right.
I love that video.
Your crew came to our event in 2013. That was the first time in 50 years where a community swim could take place, and it takes a lot of preparation to make sure that the water is safe, and it's a deep water swim. That means you jump off a dock, and DCR wanted us to have only 6 swimmer per lifeguard, so we had a lot of lifeguards, and swimmers had to be buddies with each other, so you and I have to sign up together and jump in together and make sure we don't lose track of each other. So safety was very important because it hasn't been done for so long. And but the people who did it loved it, and they signed right up for the next year, and we have a wait list now.
Really?
So now we are working with TCR to have more swim events. So if you are anxious to swim in the Charles, come to our website, thecharles.org, or Google in Charles River Conservancy or Swimming in the Charles, and sign up, because we plan to have multiple events. And eventually I even hope to have something like a sauna on the river, and that even in weather like that you can have a sauna and then jump into the cold river and
That sounds wonderful.
really experience the beauty of that river. Yes.
Well, I want to divert from the discussion about programs for a second, because I'm just so impressed with the passion that you have for this. And I know that you were trained as an urban planner, correct?
Yeah.
And you came from Switzerland?
That's right.
And was this on your radar before you came to Cambridge and discovered the river? Were you involved in that kind of an effort in Switzerland, or was this something that you came to the Charles and said, I need to do something about this?
A bit of both. Yes, I'm trained as an architect and city planner, and I always worked on public spaces. I always worked for public agencies. I worked for in London for the Greater London Council on the Covent Garden Market, so public spaces. Then I returned to Switzerland, to the city of Bern. So I always worked on civic spaces, and then I came to this country and also was interested in public spaces. And because I live near the Charles, and as a child I grew up swimming in rivers, in the River Aar, which is a glacial river, and the River Rhine, and wonderful rivers. It's very much part of the urban way in Switzerland to live, to jump into your river, and they are clean and exciting. So I wanted to swim in the Charles. That was my goal. So yes, it's something I brought from Switzerland, my desire for public spaces. And in Switzerland, the public sector, I guess, is better funded, and more emphasis on building a strong infrastructure, good public transportation, good bike paths. When I was an assistant city planner in Bern in the 70s, they already had 3 full-time bicycle planners. So they had designated bike paths, designated lights. So biking has been part of the Swiss and the Dutch and the Danish experience for a long time. So I came with this background of civic spaces and enjoying public spaces. But what of course is completely new is that you could start a non-profit and kind of invent yourself and put yourself on the map. So the Conservancy is a very American concept, because a non-profit doesn't really exist in Switzerland, and that foundations and individuals give us money and corporations, and allow the Conservancy to do the work we do.
It's a really interesting story. I think about Europe is so much farther ahead of the United States in terms of thinking about sustainability, and I think it's because Europe is so dense, and people have had to learn how to be more to conserve things more because the resources are obviously being depleted. And here in the United States, we've been living this other life thinking that, oh, you know, the resources we have are unending. And so it's really good to, I think, to bring a European mindset to looking at this. And it's funny thinking about the river as a public space. I've never thought of it that way. I think about urban centers as being public spaces that you think about, but I hadn't thought about something that exists in nature already and how that is public space.
And the man who is really responsible for acquiring all that land for the public, Charles Elliott, the landscape architect, he referred to the Charles River and its parklands as democratic common ground. So kind of like the common in Cambridge or Boston, but the river is common ground. And you know, if people upriver pollute it, we all suffer the consequences. So this notion of democracy and that we can gather at the river, that also kind of was the idea behind River Sing, and that your crews have filmed, and where we started it with illuminating the Weeks Bridge in 2002, and then we added more illuminations and worked with Revels, another wonderful Cambridge institution. And so now River Sing is part of the Revels annual calendar. I think we are now approaching the 12th year of River Sing, where thousands of people go to the river. If you've not been to River Sing, this is a Cambridge institution. That is a wonderful one. So there are forces coming together celebrating the river. So on River Sing, as the light falls, boats come down the river, a sun and the moon, because it's the autumnal equinox. And so they dance on the Charles, and then Stan Strickland plays on his saxophone, and then a call and response with George Emlyn on the banks, and so it's a very moving experience to be part of the river, completely non-commercial enterprise. People just gather there and sing and celebrate the season and the river.
That's amazing. Well, I do have to say that I think that you are a person who to be able to look at your work and see what a huge impact you've made, I think that's just incredibly admirable, and I thank you for that.
Well, there's a lot more to be done.
Yes, I'm sure.
But what's wonderful is that some people, some generous civic donors have now approached us. Somebody came to us and said, "Oh, you know, I would love to illuminate the Harvard Bridge, which is the Mass Avenue Bridge." So that came pretty much out of the blue. And it is wonderful because there's so many opportunities for civically minded people to make a difference that benefit all of us. I mean, it's nice that people give money to museums and schools and hospitals, but I want civic donors to also think of civic spaces, because it's going to make the life of millions much more enjoyable to see the bridges lit. And we are almost there to have commitments for all the bridges, because Mass DOT, they're restoring the Anderson and Western and River Street and Weeks, so they have commitments for those bridges. The Longfellow Bridge will have lighting, the Zaken Bridge already has lighting. We're still looking for a way to illuminate the BU Bridge. And there's also a bridge further down the river, the Craigie Bridge and the Green Line Viaduct, so we're looking for donors for that. But with the longest bridge, the Harvard Bridge, being illuminated, that will be beautiful, and it will be much safer for bicyclists and walkers, because right now you can go over the Harvard Bridge at night and you don't even see when somebody comes towards you because there are no lights on the sidewalk. So it will be beautiful and it will be fun. It will be lit Smoot by Smoot. So awesome. Celebrating the story of the Smoot is really exciting. Yeah,
I think about this as almost a European thing. I think about European cities that have rivers with bridges, and I always see them illuminated, so you can get the sense of the depth of the city and the river. And when you were mentioning that the Weeks footbridge is illuminated, and just to think about making those pearls kind of continue on.
Well, the illumination of the Weeks Bridge is mostly security lighting, but it has some side effects, which is good. But we also would like to have the facades illuminated to really see the architecture and the underbelly, as I call it. So you really then have the full beauty, because the Weeks Bridge is a beautiful bridge. It was done by McKim, Mead and White, who also did the business school, and it was built to carry the steam to the business school. So it started off as a very functional building, but it's a beautiful bridge.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to run out of time before we talk about the skate park.
Oh, right.
This is a major effort that's you've undertaken for many years now, and it's finally coming to fruition. So let's talk about that. How did you come up with a concept for a skate park?
Well, my son is a skater, so I have to admit to that. But then I asked the students at the Radcliffe seminar to come up with ideas of what to do underneath the Zaken Bridge. It's a no man's land, it's very noisy. You have the trucks above, you have the Boston sand and gravel, you have the diesel trucks. It's really very noisy, and it's extremely polluted because it was industrial wasteland. So we picked that very challenging site. In hindsight, I'm not sure I would have launched that project had I known it would take me 15 years to break ground. But we had to overcome a lot of obstacles. The land used to be owned jointly by the Mass Highway and the Turnpike Authority, so then it had to be transferred to Mass DOT, then it had to be transferred back to DCR. So if you imagine just the legal aspect. Fortunately, we had the pro bono help of Wilmer Hale. They have been very generous, and without their counsel, Bob Fitzpatrick, we could not have even dreamt to build that skate park. Then all the environmental issues, we had to test what's there. We had to develop a plan of how to take all that toxic soil, and there's everything in there you can imagine that you don't ever want to hear about. Put it underneath the concrete, then cap it with new soil. And we even had to assume all environmental liability, although we are a tiny nonprofit, and then to go out and buy environmental insurance in case there's something there that we didn't know.
Wow.
So, but we had some very generous donors, and the Lynch Foundation took an early lead to help us with that. And we probably have over 500 donors that have given money, from $5 skaters who gave us money to the city of Cambridge has given us $200,000, the state of Massachusetts a bit, and some foundations. And then in the end, Vans, the sneaker company, they came in with a major sponsorship, and they also paying DCR for 7 years of maintenance. So that kind of we're almost there, but we're breaking ground on the first. At the end of March, when the snow is gone. So right now, the snow is preloading the site. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. So when are you expecting to be able to open the park? When will we be skating there?
Well, you never quite know what surprises you find. But I saw the schedule. It's a 6.5 months construction schedule, and so let's hope we're not finding any new problems. Yes. And so we plan to break ground this fall. I get some hate mail from skaters. You promised me a skate park 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And I tell them, look, I worked on it every day.
You do.
And sometimes it's not all predictable. But we have a wonderful team. We have a great project manager, a great board of directors who believed in the skate park all these years and helped us push through that.
And this is sort of connected to North Point, right?
It's in North Point Park.
In North Point Park.
It's in this kind of no man's area. But from the Big Dig, there are 100 million of mitigation funds that help to create the lagoons and the bridges. Then the federal government came in with 30 million of recovery money to build the North Bank Bridge. Then EF came in with EF2, and now they're going to build EF3. So it's going to be a real campus environment with this restaurant, with the skate park. And eventually the skate park will be an Olympic sport, and it will be attract international events.
You have incredible vision, I have to say. Quickly, we have our last 2.5 minutes here. Let's talk about is it on here? What's going on in Alston and the end of I-90.
I-90. Well, it is as the turnpike needs to restore the viaduct. They're also going to realign the turnpike, removing the toll booth, and that gives an extraordinary opportunity to create what we call the Olston Esplanade. It's right across from Magazine Beach, and it's this area here, those acres in the middle of the city, they can be developed if the streets are realigned. It's possible to get the West Station there, commuter rail, and then link it over the BU Bridge, and then through Cambridge, a bike path and a connection. So there are a lot of opportunities along the river, and this is a wonderful one, and we're working on that. And also with the Olympics being proposed for Boston, we want to make sure that advantages come with it, that do no harm, and look at the planning process. How can that planning process benefit everybody, not just the athletes or the organizers, but everybody in Cambridge and the greater Boston area.
That's amazing. So we have like a minute left. So tell people how they can get involved with the Charles River Conservancy.
Well, thank you for suggesting that. We have a website, thecharles.org, or you can Google Charles River Conservancy. And I've done probably well over 100 shows about all these topics. So if you go to YouTube and you type in Magazine Beach or Swimming in the Charles, you can find information. And I love working with CCTV. You've done a great job, and I use it as a teaching tool as well. And it's wonderful that you exist, and may CCTV get stronger and bigger.
Well, hopefully we continue to work with people who are as visionary as you are, and thank you for everything you've done for this community and continue to do. So again, go to thecharles.org if you want to learn more about volunteer opportunities throughout the year, and always think about what a great resource the river is for all of us, and go down and take advantage of it and soak it up. It's good for our souls, I think.
It is, yeah. Like Thoreau said, it's like a wing. We are a winged city as a result of it. We are very lucky.
Well, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
This is Renata von Tscharner from Charles River Conservancy, and we will see you next week. Thanks a lot for watching.